Thank you very much, Chairwoman Maloney. I first want to agree with my friend, Mr. Heiss, about the vast superiority of our being in Washington together. This COVID-19 pandemic, which has cost 117,000 American lives, that we mourn, and sickened 2 million people and brought our economy to its knees, has caused real problems for Congress. And I hope we can get back quickly. I hope we have a meaningful testing and contact tracing strategy. And above all, I hope that every member of this committee and every other committee will wear a mask, because that is becoming a serious obstacle and obstruction to our doing our business in Congress. And so I just want to agree with Mr. Heiss about the importance of our getting back as quickly as possible. Professor Crenshaw, it seems like whenever we get the nation's attention through mass, nonviolent, peaceful protest and mobilization on the problem of police brutality and police violence, people want to change the subject. Do we have to overturn the Supreme Court's decision in Roe versus Wade or Planned Parenthood versus Casey? Do we have to deal with the issue of abortion before we make policing safe for all of our citizens?
Thank you, Congressman. Absolutely not. And for those who are concerned about the lives and the welfare of Black children, I couldn't agree more that we should bring their lives into the conversation. And here's how I would suggest we do so. Most of the women that I mentioned have children, and at least 3 of them lost their lives in front of their children. 2 of them experienced their children being harmed by the police shooting and killing their mothers. So one would at least expect that if Black children are of concern to anyone who is involved in this conversation, they would certainly start with the Black children who were shot by the police. They might extend that concern to children who, when their parents' estates attempt to sue the police for the loss of their parents, have not been able to secure any significant settlement to reflect what the loss of their parent means to them across their entire life. In the one case that I am aware of, in which the jury provided a verdict in the killing of Corinne Gaines of $36 million for the injury to Corinne Gaines' child and to the loss of their parental relationship, the judge ultimately overturned the jury verdict, citing for the first time immunity. So we would hope that there would be a concern about this matter, and that de-escalation also be tied to the fact that in many of these instances, children and other family members are present. So I welcome the concern about children. I would hope that it would be placed where the actual violence is happening.
Thank you very much, Professor. Mr. Lewis, Mr. Bongino in his testimony said that people should stop talking about defunding the police because it's endangering the police. I don't know of a single member of this committee or any other committee in the House who's made a speech on the House floor about this, who has advocated this for a policy, who is championing defunding the police. It's the other side that keeps bringing it up as an obvious and irrelevant distraction from our George Floyd justice and policing legislation, which is about banning chokeholds and strangleholds and racial and ethnic profiling and developing a nationwide database of police misconduct and so on. But we always start with banning the chokehold. And I see that Mr. Bongino's had something to say about that too. In the Wall Street Journal on December the 4th, Mr. Lewis, he was quoted as saying this, I can tell you, and he's talking about Erica Garner, about the strangulation and the death of Eric Garner. He says, I can tell you it's definitely not a trachea choke. He's not closing off the windpipe because Garner is oddly still talking. Saying you can't breathe means you can breathe. Saying you can't breathe means you can breathe. Now, what is your reaction to Officer Bongino's statement there? And is that going to be helpful for us to rebuild social consensus and the social contract in America?
No, it's not helpful at all. And thank you, Congressman. That's part of the problem. You know, language has power. So when you have someone who is a decorated officer like Mr. Bonjingo is, you know, you have that power that exudes to other officers who say, I want to be like him. I want to do what like he does. When you have a person in a chokehold, it should be outlawed. And that's just it, plain and simple. If a suspect is saying he cannot breathe, you take them at their word. They cannot breathe. It is not your duty to be a medical advisor to find out whether or not if they're speaking, that means they can't breathe.
Should we wait for them to die before we believe them?
Absolutely not. I mean, you know, their job is to preserve life. It should not be to take life. That should be their job. And unfortunately, many officers have the mentality, I'm going home tonight. And I believe that that mentality creates this concept of, I'm going to get you before you get me. And I understand there are neighborhoods where officers have heightened alert. But when we're talking about defunding or putting money in resources that are needed, in my opening testimony, I talked about how little mental health training is giving. Locally within Tulsa, we have all heard in reference to we need more money, we need more cops, we need more funding. So just recently, the mayor has held a new police car wrap. That money is going to wrap new police cars. Could you imagine how much money could be given to mental health services, de-escalation, racial bias training?
Thank you. Unfortunately, my time's almost up, so I just want to make one final point, which is in the HEROES Act, which we passed several weeks ago, the Democratic majority has funded state and local government, including police forces, first responders, fire departments. It's our Republican allies who refuse to support the HEROES Act, who refuse to put money into funding state and county and local government. And with that, Madam Chair, I will yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Raskin.